This video was supported by Keychron. Alright, so this is episode 7 in the desk setup build series. If you're not familiar with the series, I rebuilt this setup in the first episode, giving it a bunch of functionality in regards to video production. So this is the desk setup that I edit all of the YouTube videos on. Also shoot the talking head video on here, so it has like a video light system on there and a bunch of microphones. It's been a little while since the previous episode, so there's been some decay in certain systems. That was also really great to see, so that I know which things don't work and which ones we need to improve in this video. One of the first things I wanted to get rid of was the little basket that we created in one of the prior episodes. That was just to store like daily items in and that kind of stuff, but it's become like permanent storage for mess that I don't ever use. And I'd rather have the entire desk setup be very functional. That's why I want to add the Stream Deck Plus. This was something that Elgato actually sent me, but not for this video. So I think most people would call that totally overkill because there's already a bunch of buttons and macro pads on this thing. So I could get away with them, but then I'd have to like switch tabs and all that good stuff. It seems so it was laying around already, and it seems so Stream Decks are incredibly reliable. I wanted to put this one on there for more organizational tasks, like creating file structures, doing audio adjustments in DaVinci and that kind of stuff with the rotary encoders. While that was printing out on the Bambu Lab A1, I went to the rear of the setup because this is a total mess. Like there's a bunch of cables hanging out the back of it. And I would like to create a cable box for one of the future videos, but one of the main issues that I'm running into is this control box for the video light. So we have the Amaran 21C on this setup. The control box for that is just absolutely massive. So I took that off, and I took the pistol grips off as well. And it actually came with this extension cord in the box, which is really quite useful because we can push that through the center columns, through the monitor arm, so to say. And that way, if I need to use it for a different video production, I need to take it off the setup. It won't be a complete hassle. So we can leave that extension cord between the monitor arms, and the control box can just sit underneath the loop deck over there. If I need to access the control box really quickly because the application doesn't connect or something like that, then we can still do that as well. So one of the systems that failed at the back of the setup here as well, which has a bunch of cables running into it, so this really cleaned up the whole situation, is the KVM. So the KVM itself doesn't necessarily fail, but because I'm running 10-meter long cords to the compute box, which is a different build, I'll link it up there, it needed some like repeaters, HDMI repeaters, and the repeaters went bad. When you're editing and you just need to get something down, you don't want to deal with the display like cutting off every 10 seconds. So a little while ago I also did this project with a mouse. So basically I combined 2 mice into one mouse, which is a trackball and one that has an optical sensor. Bunch of buttons on there which you can customize to different things in editing programs, which is really quite awesome. And it does work quite well, but there's also like batteries and cables sticking out all the time. So every time I grab it, I'm trying to be very careful with it. So pretty quickly after finishing that project, or like doing that project, I bought myself a Keychron M6. So that if we continue the mouse project, then I'm also not reliant on it to be finished within like a day or so. So that Keychron M6 is performing really quite nicely. It's kind of a competitor to the Logitech MX Master, but more focused on gaming. So this is the 4000 Hz polling rate version. This one isn't sponsored, by the way. I bought this one myself, but Keychron is sponsoring this video with a Q1 keyboard, which is a really awesome device, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the 3D print came off looking really quite good as well. I made the bottom plate overlap so that when we're routing a cable outside of it to charge either the keyboard or the mouse, we don't necessarily see directly into the setup. We don't see the cable mess. And I used some M4 bolts to hold that bottom plate in place. If you're enjoying the video so far, then definitely also consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like, leaving a comment, really helps me out. And if you like any of the designs, you can also check out my Patreon page. So a little while ago I sent Keychron also some pictures of the prior setup, like the concept desk setup with the floating keyboards, and they responded with wanting to send me another keyboard. So that was kind of my intention a little bit. I've always wanted an analog mechanical keyboard, and Keychron makes one of the best ones where, at least for my purposes, one of the best ones because it's wireless. So a lot of the analog mechanical keyboards either aren't that great in terms of response times or other stuff like that, but they're also not wireless, and this one seems to be really quite decent in every single regard. When I got it out of packaging, I was extremely shocked by the weight of it, and I know that every single reviewer talks about that, every single viewer takes it out of the box and they're like, whoa, this is heavy. It is heavy. It's like an absolute brick. So they did a really good job at the build quality of this one. So at the back of it, you have a bunch of switches, which you can turn it from, Bluetooth modes to a wireless dongle mode or like wired mode, and also switch it between Mac or Windows. And yeah, it comes with USB-C cables, a keycap puller. In general, it just looks really, really, really good on this setup as well. The white switches on there with the black accents. And it has this little knob at the top right corner. That one is automatically set up for Windows audio levels. Initially I thought I'd reset that to something different, but it's actually become really quite useful. The entire keyboard is customizable as well in the Keychron launcher software, which is a web application. So you just go onto Chrome or Brave or whatever, type in Keychron launcher, and then you can connect to your keyboard. Now, because this is an analog mechanical keyboard, you can set up the actuation distance for each key specifically, and that's very useful for gaming, so you have rapid trigger and that kind of stuff as well. But you could also just set it up to do certain macros. So I've set up the F1 key to open ChatGPT. So overall, I'm just really impressed with this keyboard. I've been typing on it for the past couple of months actually. Yeah, just highly recommend getting a Keychron keyboard. They're pretty well known for making really great stuff, so I'll leave some links in the description down below. So the next thing I really wanted to tackle was the Elgato foot pedal. So the Elgato foot pedal isn't wireless. It needs a wire that goes to the computer, of course. And up until now, it's just been hanging all over the place, and then eventually it snapped off at one point and I didn't put it back into its spot, which is kind of a shame because it's a €60 foot pedal, which I don't use. So I thought I'd spend some time and try to route the cable through the sit-stand decks. Didn't really realize how difficult that was going to be, and that's always the trap that I fall into. I'm like, oh, it'll be like 5 minutes to fix that. And this time it literally took me 5 hours to do this. Basically, the way I went about that was resting the entire setup on some bars, and that way we could lift up the bottom section, take off one of the legs without, taking apart the entire setup. So that wasn't that bad of a situation, but then, took off all the caps and started drilling holes into it. So the top one went totally fine, could just drill an extra hole. There wasn't too much room there, but it's pretty easy. There's a lot of room for the cable to go into it as well. But at the bottom, when I started drilling holes over there, I kept running into plastic bits. And I tried extending the legs and then pushing it back in to see what the plastic bit is actually doing. But essentially at the bottom of one of the middle segments is a plastic column structure that goes around another plastic column structure so that it stays stable to a certain extent. And you have to drill from the bottom of the legs all the way through that plastic segment. And that way you can route the cable through. But it's also going to be crushing the cable. So it's not the best modification here, because if I somehow jam the legs, it's going to be a total pain to fix that. Eventually I did manage to get the cable through, and I did actually test it on the ground just to see if everything would be okay. For some reason it seems to push the cable out once you lower the legs, so it's not actually crushing it. But I'm not sure how long that's going to last. So I also drilled a hole next to the Elgato foot pedal into the base. Went into Shaper 3D to 3D model a little cap to go around that hole and around the cable, and 3D printed that one, super glued that into place, makes it look a little bit cleaner. Now, because the setup is on wheels, every time I roll it around, stuff seems to be shaking out of place, and one of the worst ones is the key light actually. That one just, moves all over the place and it ends up looking really quite bad, so I wanted to improve the mounting situation over there. Basically, we have two monitor arms, and between that we need kind of a bar that then connects them together and holds the key light in place. So this is a little sensor structure from an older monitor arm that I had laying around. Just drilled a hole in the middle and added this hardware which allows us to connect a spigot mount. And that spigot mount allows us to connect it to the key light. So in general, these weren't the most exciting upgrades, but they really made it a lot more complete in my eyes, especially with the key light now mounted properly. It just looks a lot more solid, and everything is nicely put together again, dusted off. It's functioning properly, which is really quite great. Hopefully sometime in the future we can finish it off completely and actually call it finished as well. Move it into a different space. This will be the main actual editing and YouTube production setup. Hope it gave you some inspiration. See you in the next one.